For centuries, humans had been at the center of everything in the galaxy. They were explorers, traders, diplomats, and warriors. No matter where one went in the galaxy, there was always a human presence, guiding, negotiating, and solving conflicts. The human race had built the bridges that connected planets, species, and nations. Without them, the galaxy felt more like a collection of disconnected worlds, each struggling with its own problems. But that all changed in a single day. No one saw it coming. It started as a whisper in the galaxy's deepest corridors. Rumors of a decision, one that would shake the foundation of everything. But no one took it seriously. Humans had always been known for their unpredictability, after all. It wasn't until the first planet's transmission went silent that the true weight of the situation was realized. A respected human diplomat, known across dozens of systems, had simply disappeared. His last transmission was a message of finality, a simple sentence that carried an ominous weight. "We are leaving." At first, there was confusion. Was it a mistake? Was the signal disrupted by some solar flare or cosmic interference? Surely, they had misinterpreted the message. But as the hours passed, and more humans began vanishing from important roles across the galaxy, the truth began to settle in. Humans were gone. It didn't happen all at once. No massive fleet or army made an exit, no sudden rush to evacuate. It was quiet, subtle, as if they were slowly pulling away from the universe they had helped shape. Their ships stopped arriving at trade hubs. Their embassies fell silent. Communications from their space stations ceased altogether. The lights went out, one system after another. As the days turned to weeks, the absence of humans became painfully evident. Plans that had been carefully laid out for interplanetary cooperation slowly fell apart. The Galactic Council, a body that had been built with human influence at its core, was in disarray. Leaders of other species, who had once worked alongside the humans to maintain peace and order, now found themselves without direction. The systems that humans had once kept in balance were beginning to break free, testing their newfound freedom in ways no one had predicted. It was as though a piece of the galaxy's soul had been ripped out, and now everything was beginning to fall apart. The warlords of the Xanthorian Federation, long kept in check by human military presence, began pushing their boundaries. They took over several independent worlds on the outer rim, their ships and soldiers now roaming free, without fear of the consequences they had once known. The Darnexian coalition, usually restrained by human diplomacy, began to make aggressive moves toward resource-rich planets. The peaceful worlds of the Veracra species, who had always relied on human trade to survive, found themselves cornered, unable to protect their borders from the sudden influx of pirates and rogue fleets. Even the simplest systems, once humming with quiet stability, now buzzed with uncertainty. The Karana Exchange, a hub of communication and commerce, was now a ghost town. The merchant fleets that once moved in and out daily were now idle, docked, and abandoned. The chaos that spread across the galaxy was not limited to military actions. On many worlds, the absence of humans left a deep, unsettling void. The cultural richness that humans had fostered in their dealings, the scientific progress they had helped guide, and even their remarkable ability to inspire cooperation between diverse races, these things were now missing. The galaxy began to feel empty, as if everything was off balance, as if something essential had slipped away without any warning. But there were those who didn't panic. There were those who saw this as an opportunity, not a catastrophe. The leaders of the Keshai Alliance, a powerful and cunning group of traders, saw this as the perfect time to seize control of the interstellar trade routes. They had long coveted the influence that humanity wielded through their trade agreements, and now saw an opening to take it for themselves. The Threxian Empire, notorious for its militaristic expansionism, viewed this as a moment of weakness in the galaxy's fragile balance. They began to rearm and prepare for territorial conquests. And then there were the others, the ones who weren't just afraid of the power struggle, but were worried about something darker. The quiet ones, the historians, The scientists, the philosophers, they began to ask questions, ones that no one else seemed to be considering. Why did humans leave? What could have possibly made them abandon their position in the galaxy? Were they running from something? Or did they simply not care anymore? The questions lingered, unanswered, but the galaxy continued to spiral in uncertainty. It was as if the absence of humanity wasn't just a physical disappearance, but something deeper, an absence of purpose, of meaning. A few weeks into this new reality, a strange message was received by one of the last remaining human embassies in the distant Orion cluster. The transmission was simple, direct, and almost completely unreadable, except for a single phrase at the end. "We are still watching." The message sent a ripple of fear through the galaxy. What did that mean? Were the humans watching from afar, waiting for the right moment to return? Or had they left something behind, something that was now controlling their fate, and perhaps the fate of the galaxy itself? That single phrase raised the stakes. No one knew if it was a threat or a promise. No one knew what the humans had truly left behind. But whatever it wasn't over. The galaxy could feel it. There was more to this silence than just the absence of humans. They had left, yes, but their presence was still in the systems, still in the shadows, still watching. The galaxy was on edge, teetering between the hope that the humans would return to restore order, and the fear that their absence meant something far worse. No one could be sure. Not yet. And so, the silence continued, deeper and more unsettling with every passing day. The galaxy waited. But for what exactly? The unknown hung in the air, as thick and heavy as a storm that had yet to break. And all the galaxy could do was wait for the answers that were still hidden in the silence of the humans' departure. The galaxy was beginning to fracture. At first, the absence of humans was met with uncertainty, but now, as the days stretched into weeks, the cracks that had been invisible at first started to grow wider. Systems that had been held together by human influence were beginning to unravel. The peace treaties they had brokered were no longer respected. The stability that had been a hallmark of the human era was fading fast. The Xanthorian Empire, which had always been kept in check by human diplomats, began making aggressive moves toward their neighbors. They started annexing uninhabited planets on the outer rim, not with the subtlety they had once used, but with sheer force. The border worlds that had once been neutral now found themselves under the rule of the Xanthorian warlords. Their military, once disciplined and restrained, was now unstoppable, pushing farther into unprotected space. The Elara, a peaceful race that had long relied on human mediation to settle disputes, began to withdraw into themselves. Without the steady hand of human negotiators, they turned inward, sealing off their borders. But it wasn't a peaceful retreat. It was a tense, defensive stance. Their cities grew quieter, their once thriving trade routes closed off, leaving the galaxy wondering if the Elara were preparing for something worse. The tension in their space was palpable, and rumors spread that they were working on new weaponry, preparing for a future conflict. But the most unexpected event occurred in the Rim territories. Civil unrest had been simmering for years, but the absence of humans acted as a spark, setting the flames of rebellion into motion. Several independent worlds, once allies under the human-led Galactic Council, broke away and declared their independence. The planets that had once been united in trade, culture, and shared goals now found themselves divided. Old alliances fractured as everyone scrambled to find new paths forward. Some worlds fell into chaos, unable to find their way without the steadying hand of human leadership. Riots broke out in the streets of capital cities. Governments collapsed. Lawlessness began to spread like a virus, moving from one planet to the next. What made it worse was the realization that no one knew how to stop it. The human-created defense systems, once designed to stabilize and protect the galaxy, began to malfunction. These systems were spread across many worlds, hidden in plain sight, integrated into the very fabric of society. Without humans to maintain them, the once perfect machines began to glitch, sending random signals that confused the inhabitants of those worlds. Automated security systems were activating and deactivating at random. Some planets found their defenses locked, unable to respond to external threats. Others found them shutting down completely, leaving them exposed to marauders and opportunistic invaders. No one knew how to fix them. The advanced technology humans had left behind was now a source of frustration, even fear. In the midst of all this, a small group of scholars and scientists, mostly from the Outer Rim, began to meet in secret. They called themselves the Order of the Last Pact. This group, made up of historians, mathematicians, and alien engineers, was the first to realize the true extent of the damage humanity's absence had caused. They discovered something no one had suspected. Humanity hadn't just left in haste. They had orchestrated their departure. The Order found ancient documents hidden in long-forgotten human archives. These documents, encrypted and spread across multiple locations, revealed that the humans had planned for this. They had anticipated the chaos that would follow their departure and had built certain systems into place to ensure that it would unfold. But there was a catch. The systems, the plans, the safeguards were all interconnected. One piece could not be solved without triggering others, and the full picture could only be seen when everything was pieced together. The Order knew they were onto something monumental, but it was clear that time was running out. The galaxy was already starting to spiral out of control, and there was no telling how much longer they could hold the line before everything collapsed. As the panic spread, whispers of a new faction began to emerge. It was a group that no one had seen before, a shadowy organization that appeared to be manipulating events from behind the scenes. Some believed they were former human allies, working with remnants of humanity's technology. Others thought it was a new player in the galaxy, one that had come out of the void after the humans left. This new faction was known as the Obsidian Veil, and their influence began to be felt everywhere. They sent agents to destabilize the already fragile governments. They sparked rebellions in the places where resistance was weakest. Their goal, however, remained unclear. Were they simply taking advantage of the chaos, or did they have a more sinister agenda? The rumors surrounding the Obsidian Veil grew darker as the weeks wore on. There were reports of covert operations targeting the few remaining human-held territories, as if someone was trying to erase the last vestiges of human influence from the galaxy. Some claimed they were searching for something, perhaps a weapon, or perhaps a person. Someone, or something that could tip the balance of power in their favor. But what they were after remained a mystery, even to those closest to the shadows. The Order of the Last Pact, desperate to uncover the truth, began to make their move. They knew that the answers were hidden in plain sight, somewhere in the forgotten corners of the galaxy, in places where humans had once worked to keep peace. They scoured abandoned stations, deep space observatories, and hidden vaults for any clue that might lead them to the truth. Their search was methodical, but time was not on their side. The galaxy was fracturing too quickly, and the cracks were widening faster than anyone could repair them. With each passing day, the stakes grew higher. The leaders of the various factions, those who had once been allies of humanity, were now facing the consequences of their own decisions. They had once relied on human guidance, human strength, and human ingenuity, but now they had to rely on themselves. The problem was, they didn't have the answers, they didn't have the resources, and they didn't have the unity that humans had always brought to the table. It wasn't just the political landscape that was shifting. There were whispers among the common people, too. Stories began to circulate about strange happenings in the stars. People claimed to have seen flashes of light in the distance, too large to be anything natural, but too small to be ships. Others swore they saw human-made structures reactivating in abandoned sectors. Some of the more superstitious among the galaxy's species began to speak of a coming storm. A storm brought on by the absence of humanity. They said it was a storm that would bring the galaxy to its knees, and only the return of humans could stop it. In the face of all this, a few brave souls began to take action. They formed resistance groups, seeking to unite the fractured galaxy, to bring some semblance of order. But even as they gathered forces, they knew they were fighting against something much larger than themselves. The cracks in the galaxy were not just political. They were deep, fundamental, and no amount of unity would be enough to repair them unless the truth about humanity's disappearance was uncovered. The galaxy was on the edge of collapse, and the more the Order uncovered, the more they realized. It wasn't just the absence of humanity that was causing the chaos. It was something else, something even darker, that had been set into motion the moment humans walked out. The galaxy was on the edge of collapse. Systems once united by the strength and influence of humanity were now fractured. The disappearance of the humans had left an aching void, a loss that rippled through every corner of space. The cracks in the fabric of intergalactic peace were spreading faster than anyone could repair them, and whispers of a dark force, manipulating events from the shadows, only added to the fear that the galaxy was teetering on the brink of destruction. But then, something unexpected happened. A series of transmissions, encrypted with a code no one had seen in centuries, began to appear. These were not ordinary messages. These were the return of the human files. At first, no one knew what to make of it. The transmissions were brief, filled with strange symbols, and laced with an unsettling urgency. The first to receive the message was a small, isolated colony on the edge of Xanthorian space. The colony's leaders were among the last to know of the human departure, having been too far removed from the center of galactic politics to notice the signs before it was too late. When the files arrived, the colony's communications officer, a young technician named Joro, was the first to crack the code. The symbols that once seemed indecipherable suddenly fell into place as Joro worked tirelessly through the night. When the final sequence unlocked, what he found was beyond anything he could have imagined. A map of the galaxy, but it wasn't just a map. It was a detailed blueprint of humanity's most advanced technologies, hidden in secure vaults, scattered across distant, forgotten corners of space. The files included coordinates, classified documents, and encrypted blueprints that detailed not just the advanced weapon systems humanity had created, but entire archives of research on intergalactic diplomacy, energy sources, and most chilling of all, the secrets of human genetics. The map marked a dozen locations, some of which had been thought to be nothing more than myths. But they were real. The files revealed that the humans had left behind more than just their technology. They had left behind a legacy, an intricate plan that was meant to guide the galaxy through the chaos that would follow their disappearance. However, the plan was incomplete, and its purpose was unclear. What was worse, those who found the files were not the only ones looking. Others, more dangerous, were hunting the same secrets. As the files began to circulate through underground networks, the galaxy's governments were thrown into chaos. Who could be trusted with this knowledge? Was it meant to be shared, or was there a darker reason behind the files' sudden return? The various factions, the Xanthorians, the Elara, and even the rebel groups, each saw the files as a potential weapon, a key to dominating the galaxy or restoring order to the chaos. But with so many interested parties, the danger of the files falling into the wrong hands became more and more likely. The peace that had once existed seemed like a distant memory, and suspicion turned to fear. In the midst of all this, a small group of unlikely heroes began to emerge. They were a mix of different species, from former human allies to those who had been once left in the dust by human technology. They didn't trust the factions vying for power, nor did they trust the whispers of the dark organization, the Obsidian Veil, that had been stirring up trouble. The group was led by a former human diplomat, Elara, who had once played a crucial role in maintaining peace between warring species. Elara had never been one to settle for the status quo, and as the galaxy's situation grew more dire, she knew that the return of the human files was not just a coincidence. She had a hunch that the files held the key to the future of the galaxy, but they also came with a dangerous price. Elara's team set off on a dangerous mission to retrieve the files and uncover their true purpose. They moved in secret, always one step ahead of the chaos that was sweeping the galaxy. Their journey led them to the first of the marked locations, a forgotten human research facility deep in the outer reaches of space. It had once been a hub of innovation, a place where humans had tested some of their most dangerous technologies. Now, it was abandoned, cold, and silent, floating in the void. As Elara and her team boarded the facility, they found it eerily intact. But there was something off about the place. The lights flickered on, and strange mechanical noises echoed in the halls. It felt as though the facility had been waiting for them. In the heart of the facility, they found what they were searching for, a vault containing a massive data core. As they accessed the files, Elara's team was bombarded with a surge of encrypted information, but one file stood out among the rest, a video recording, encrypted with the highest level of security. When Elara managed to unlock it, the face of a human officer appeared on the screen. His expression was grim, and the words he spoke were both a warning and a promise. The galaxy is not ready. What we left behind is more dangerous than you realize. Only the strongest will survive what comes next. Use the files wisely, or it will all fall apart. Elara's heart sank as she watched the officer's final words. The files were not just a guide to peace. They were also a warning. The technology they contained was more powerful than anyone could have imagined. Humanity had known that their departure would trigger chaos, but they had also known that the galaxy would need a new kind of leadership to survive. The officer's message ended with one last chilling instruction: find the last of us. Only then can the galaxy be saved. The room fell silent as the team absorbed the weight of the message. The path ahead was clear, but it was filled with dangers. The galaxy was already in turmoil, and the obsidian veil was closing in on the files. Elara knew that the only way to prevent a total collapse was to find the remnants of humanity, the last survivors who had somehow escaped the galaxy's chaos and had kept hidden for so long. But where could they be? And would they even want to return to a galaxy that had been torn apart by their absence? As they made plans to follow the next set of coordinates, Elara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The galaxy was unraveling, and it was becoming clearer that there were forces far more powerful than anyone had realized, forces that had been waiting for this moment for years. The return of the human files was not just a gift, it was a test. And Elara knew that if they failed, the galaxy would pay the price. But the question remained: who else was after the files, and what would they do with the power contained within? As the team prepared for their next move, the galaxy held its breath. The return of the human files had set off a chain of events that could not be undone. And now, the future of the galaxy rested on the shoulders of those brave enough to unlock its secrets. The galaxy had been at peace for centuries, but that peace was slowly beginning to crumble. Tensions were rising across star systems, and whispers of a new force emerging from the shadows were everywhere. The once stable alliances between species were deteriorating, and no one knew how to stop it. At the heart of this rising chaos was a secret that had been buried for far too long, an ancient human weapon, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was known as the Trigger, a failsafe left behind by humanity, designed to be activated in the most dire of circumstances. Now, the galaxy was on the brink of that very moment. It had all started when a small, unknown ship appeared in the outskirts of the galaxy, carrying an ancient piece of technology, the key to unlocking the power of the Trigger. The ship's crew, a group of former human scientists and engineers, had long since vanished, but their legacy lived on in the form of this one piece of forgotten tech. The moment it was discovered, factions from across the galaxy began to fight for control of it, unaware of the catastrophic consequences that lay in its power. Some wanted to use it as a weapon, others as a tool to control the galaxy's future. But no one understood its true purpose. Among the many groups searching for the Trigger was a young woman named Helia, a former soldier turned mercenary. She had grown up hearing stories about the power humanity once wielded, and now she was part of a team that was hunting for the very thing that could change everything. Talia had always been skeptical about the legends, but as she dug deeper into the ancient texts and uncovered more about the trigger, she began to see its true potential. The more she learned, the more she understood that the galaxy was heading toward a dangerous tipping point. The trigger wasn't just a weapon. It was a catalyst, a force that could either save or destroy everything. Talia's journey took her to the heart of a lost human colony, hidden deep within the Nebula Crescent. It was a place no one had visited in centuries, a place where the remnants of humanity had once prepared for the worst. The colony, abandoned and forgotten, was the final location where the trigger had been activated. Its dark, empty halls now held the only remaining clue to unlocking its full potential. As Talia and her team scoured the colony, they stumbled upon a hidden chamber, its entrance sealed with a complex lock only accessible through an ancient code, a code that only Talia seemed to recognize. When the chamber finally opened, they were greeted with a sight that shook them to their core. Inside, buried under layers of dust and debris, was a massive machine, its design unlike anything they had ever seen. It was human, yet alien, a fusion of organic and mechanical components that pulsed with an eerie energy. At the center of the machine was a small, glowing orb, the heart of the trigger. Talia reached out to touch it, but before her fingers could make contact, the machine suddenly hummed to life. The orb flickered, casting a strange light over the room, and the walls shook as though the entire structure was waking from a long slumber. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the chamber, deep, ancient, and filled with authority. "You have awakened it," the voice said, sending chills down Talia's spine. "The trigger is now in your hands. You must decide its fate. Will you save the galaxy, or will you bring about its destruction?" Talia's heart raced. She had always known there would be consequences to finding the trigger, but now that it was before her, the weight of responsibility was overwhelming. She glanced at her team, who were just as stunned as she was, unsure of what to do next. The voice continued, "The galaxy is unstable. The war between the factions will soon escalate, and if you do not act quickly, it will be too late. The trigger has the power to reset everything, to reset the balance of the galaxy. But be warned, its activation will come at a great cost." As Talia stood there, wrestling with the decision, she heard the distant sound of ships approaching. The factions were closing in. Her team had no time to lose. But how could she make such a decision? The trigger was a force beyond comprehension, and its consequences were unknown. She knew that the galaxy's future rested in her hands, but she also knew that whatever she chose would have ripple effects that no one could predict. In that moment, Talia remembered the stories her grandmother had told her about humanity's rise and fall. They had been a species of incredible strength, intelligence, and ambition, but they had also been their own worst enemy. Humanity had created the trigger as a way to protect themselves, but in doing so, they had also created a weapon capable of destroying everything they had built. It was as if they had known their own flaws, and had left behind a failsafe in case their darker instincts ever took over. With the factions closing in, Talia knew she had no choice. She had to act. As she approached the machine, the orb pulsed again, its light growing brighter. The voice spoke once more, its tone more urgent. "The time is now. Choose wisely." Talia hesitated for a moment, then made her decision. With a steady hand, she placed her palm on the orb. The chamber filled with a blinding light, and for a moment, everything went silent. The energy from the trigger surged through her, and she felt a strange connection to the galaxy itself, a link to every star, every planet, every living being. She could feel the tensions, the fears, the hopes of countless species. It was overwhelming, but it also gave her a sense of clarity. She knew what had to be done. With a final breath, Talia activated the trigger. The light exploded outward, filling the entire colony and then stretching across the galaxy. Every faction, every ship, every leader felt the surge of energy. For a moment, everything stood still. Time seemed to freeze, and the galaxy held its breath. And then, as the light began to fade, Talia realized what had happened. The galaxy had been reset. The factions were no longer fighting. The power struggles, the wars, the lies, they were all gone. In their place was a fragile peace, one that could be rebuilt from the ground up. But Talia knew that peace wouldn't last forever. The galaxy had always been on the brink, and now it was up to a new generation to maintain the balance. The trigger had done its job, but the future was still uncertain. As Talia looked out across the galaxy, she realized that the human legacy had not been one of destruction, but of hope. The trigger had been humanity's final gift, a chance for the galaxy to start anew. But she also knew that the next time the galaxy teetered on the edge, it would be up to those who came after her to decide whether to pull the trigger once again. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The once mighty human fleets, the varied force that had once been feared and respected across the stars, had disappeared. No one knew exactly what had happened. Some said they had vanished into the deep reaches of space, lost forever. Others whispered that they had found a way to hide, biding their time until the right moment. Whatever the truth, the galaxy had learned to live without them. But peace, fragile as it was not meant to last. It all started on a quiet day in the central sector. Nothing special. The stars were as bright as they always were. The planets continued their orbits, and the factions went about their business until the signal came. At first, it was nothing more than static, a strange signal that no one could place. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered. Then it grew stronger, clearer, and unmistakable. A message, a single phrase that echoed across every communication channel, every ship, and every station. "We're back." The message didn't just carry words. It carried a weight, a chilling reminder of a time when humanity had been unstoppable. Across the galaxy, leaders froze. The sound of that message reverberated in their bones. Humanity was back, and with it came the looming fear of what that could mean. After years of silence, they had returned. But why? And what had they learned in their time away? On the quiet, almost forgotten planet of Organ, Commander Elara stared at the screen as the message flashed in front of her. She had heard rumors, of course, the kind that were passed from one officer to another, from one rebel to another. But none of it had felt real until now. Humanity, or what was left of them, had returned. There was no way to prepare for this moment. It had been generations since anyone had seen the human warships, and even longer since they had been the dominant force in the galaxy. The galaxy was a different place now. An unstable one, yes, but one that had managed to move on. Or had they? Elara's mind raced as she considered the possibilities. Her people, the Exitarians, had spent the last few decades consolidating power, taking advantage of the human absence to fill the power vacuum. They had become the leading force in the galaxy, but they had always known, deep down, that the humans would return. They had left a legacy of technology, knowledge, and tactics that no one could truly replicate. The Exitarians had worked hard to match that, but they were far from equal. And now, standing on the edge of a new chapter, Elara knew the galaxy was about to face its most defining moment. She wasn't alone in her concerns. Across the galaxy, factions that had risen to prominence in the absence of humans were now scrambling. The Workan Confederacy, a powerful alliance of former colonies, sent out an urgent transmission to every corner of their territory. "Prepare for war," the message said simply. "The humans are coming." Fear and uncertainty were palpable, as even the most powerful leaders could not ignore the weight of humanity's legacy. Days passed, and the galaxy held its breath. And then, the ships came. They appeared at the outer edges of the galaxy, as silent as they were ominous. A massive fleet, the likes of which had never been seen before, moved into the star systems with a purpose that was both terrifying and unmistakable. Each ship was like a moving fortress, a dark reminder of humanity's once unmatched power. Their technology had evolved beyond what anyone could have predicted. The ships were sleek, deadly, and equipped with weapons that made even the bravest commanders pause. But it wasn't just the ships that were unsettling. It was the way they moved. There was no aggression, no immediate attack. They moved like predators, slow and deliberate, as if Elara was one of the first to make contact with them. She sat in her command chair, staring at the view screen as the fleet approached her position. She had heard the rumors about how the humans had changed, how they had adapted, how their civilization had evolved into something new. But seeing it in person was a different matter entirely. The human ships, though old by some standards, were powerful beyond belief. They were organized, efficient, and deadly. But what really struck Elara was the silence that followed them. No demands, no threats. Just that eerie quiet, the kind that made her skin crawl. After what felt like an eternity, a single human vessel sent a transmission to her ship. The face that appeared on the screen was young. Too young to have been in charge of anything important, or so Elara thought at first. But the calm confidence in their eyes told a different story. This was someone who had seen and survived the chaos of the galaxy. The human spoke simply, but with authority. "We are here to reclaim what is ours." It wasn't a threat, but it didn't need to be. The message was clear. The humans weren't just returning for power. They were returning to reset the balance, to remind the galaxy of who they had once been. They weren't here to beg for alliances or negotiate peace. They were here to take control again, and they would stop at nothing to do it. Elara had no choice but to play along. She knew her people were not prepared for a full-scale conflict with humanity. She had seen the technology and the tactics they used. It wasn't just their ships that were advanced. It was everything. Their intelligence networks, their weapons, their strategies. All of it was superior. The human ships made their way toward the heart of the galaxy, pushing through territory that had once belonged to other factions. And with each passing day, the galaxy became more and more uncertain. Was this just a warning? Or was humanity truly planning to reclaim their position at the top? As the human fleet moved through the galaxy, it became clear that this wasn't just about taking back power. It was about resetting everything, tearing down the old and rebuilding it in their image. And so, the galaxy held its breath. For every faction, for every leader, for every species, the question remained, what would happen when the humans truly walked back in? The answer was something that no one could predict. The galaxy had been turned upside down once by their presence, and now, as the humans returned, it was clear that the chaos they brought would either reshape the future or destroy everything in its path. Elara, like so many others, was left wondering just how far the humans would go. They had been gone for so long, but now that they were back, they were not the same. The galaxy had underestimated them, and now, as the human ships moved deeper into the star systems, it became painfully obvious. The humans were not here to negotiate peace. They were here to take back what had once been theirs, and they were willing to fight anyone who stood in their way.